Hello, I'm the Reverend Sarah Keane, curate in the Golden Cap team. Welcome to this week's Midweek message. The theme this week is one of remembrance, looking forward to Remembrance Day and Remembrance Sunday. Now, for many of my generation, we have had the privilege of living in a time of peace. Unless we had family members who joined the armed services, the wars and conflicts around the world have not touched us very strongly. We may have watched in horror the pictures on our television sets, but the bombs and the shells were not falling in our own gardens. How very different for the generation immediately before me and those before that. For a lot of the early to mid part of the 20th century, conflict was all around. When I was a schoolgirl in the mid-70s, in my first year at high school, we went on a trip that happened every year for first years, which was to go to Broughton House in North Manchester. Broughton House was a home for wounded servicemen. The idea was that a group of 11-year-old girls could go and cheer them up a bit. This, of course, was before the days of safeguarding, and such a visit would probably no longer take place. But in our day, it was something that the inhabitants, patients of Broughton House looked forward to each year. We were each allotted a particular soldier for us to go and talk to. Overcoming our natural shyness, we stepped forward and looked around the room for the person that we were to chat to. My gentleman was in a side room, and when I stepped in, unfortunately, he was fast asleep. Using some early pastoral skills, I decided not to wake him up for a conversation, but gazed on a piece of living history. Mr. Cohen was at that time about 94 years of age, and he had served in the Boer War. This was something we learnt about simply in our history lessons at school, and it was amazing to think that I was there in the presence, albeit silently, with someone who maybe took part in the relief of Mafeking. After that, I went back into the main hall and joined other friends as we met some of the servicemen from the First and Second World Wars. At the end of the time there, we were allowed to ask the nursing staff any questions that had occurred to us. What I wanted to know is, had those men really been at Broughton House all those years since the wars in which they had taken part? She replied that as a home for ex-servicemen, some of the gentlemen only arrived towards the end of their lives, where for some other reason they were incapacitated and needed the support of Broughton House. But yes, indeed, there was a major percentage of the men there who had been in that hospital ever since they were wounded in that original war. She said some of the most tragic cases were those of men who'd been wounded in the First World War too badly to return home completely, and for the first few years were regularly visited. But even by the mid-1920s, the visits had tailed off as their relatives got on with other things in life. And hence, even when I saw them, they'd been there for 50 years with few visits. I returned home in floods of tears on hearing this, my mother trying to reassure me that if they had been truly miserable, they would probably not have lived that long. And somehow the camaraderie of the other wounded servicemen at Broughton House kept them going. But the visit was a stark reminder to those who were just starting out in life that many of these men, that when they went off to war, had been little older than we were, and their lives had effectively come to an end at the point at which they were wounded. And so each Remembrance Sunday, I remember not just those who died and immediately gave their life for king and country, but all those for whom life changed forever. The hopes and aspirations they might have had for their life were completely struck down by the serious injuries they'd received while fighting for their country. And it is those men I think we also need to remember at the end of this week, now joined, of course, by many female servicemen in more recent wars overseas. So I'd just like to end with those beautiful words from Lawrence Binion's poem. They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Amen.